just like home. I'm a king at home, so baby feel at home.
Palmedio. So welcome to series 3 and episode 5 of Learning View with C.K.Naija. We're going to be using the different points of views to learn these words and also to learn their negations. So ID and do, right? And this means to be. So ID means to, right? So here it's the infinitive marker. An infinitive verb would be to be or being. Or you could say to dance or dancing. We're talking about verbs, then we're talking about them in the infinitive form, meaning to dance or dancing. So in efik-ibibio, the word that we use for this for verbs in the infinitive form is ID, and that's equivalent to the word to the infinitive form. But this is the verb root, and that's the verb, right? Adido. So if you want to say that something is something, as in it is, then we say ado, right? Ado, and that means it is. So ado, it is. Series 3 and episode 1, when we were learning about subject pronouns, what we learned was the different personal markers for the different points of views. In a lot of languages, personal pronouns also have markers or specific words that are associated with them. For example, in Spanish, for example, if you say yo soy, that means I am, right? In Spanish. But soy is only used with the word yo soy. So often you don't need to say yo, you can just say soy and people know that you mean I am. Because for example, you wouldn't say usted. After we say a subject pronoun, we need to reinforce that in the next word that comes along. So for example, in series 3 and episode 1, we learned, for example, ami, right? We learned this in series 3 and episode 1, and that meant I will buy a house. So ami, in the idea before, but the interesting to note here is that this is the subject pronoun and this is the subject pronoun marker, the marker, the prefix, the agreement. So that is always following that. So just like in Spanish, you don't need to say yo. In efik-ibibio, you also don't need to say the subject pronoun all the time. You can just say the marker and people know that you're talking in the first person singular. So this sort of rule also applies for the word to be, right? And that's what we're going to learn first of all. So to say that something is, it is ado, and that means it is. And if you go back to series 3 and episode 1, you'll find that the with the high tone is the prefix, is the marker that always follows the subject pronoun for it, which is anye. Moving on to the negation, it is not, right? Again, we don't need to say the anye, we can just stick with idogo, right? And that's the negation for the third person singular. It is not. So the E, you can think of that as it. Adido, to be, is, right? Ho is a negation. It is not. Ido. So now that we've seen the positive and the negative side of saying something is and something isn't, we can fill that in here. With the and I. Ado. Ido. Right? And that's how it works. Ado. Ido. And what we're going to do now is basically work it out for the rest. Right? So we're going to start with the first person singular. I am. I am not. So, and the subject pronoun for this is ami. So, one key clue is that the positive side is based on the subject pronoun marker, while the negative side is mostly based on the object pronoun markers. Up to here where the line is. So for the first person singular, ami, going back to series 3 episode 1, we know that this is an N, right? Amindo, meaning I am. Ami. Ndo is I am not. Amindo, I am. Ami. Ndo. Amindo, low tone. Ndo, 2 high tones to finish that off. And that's I am not. Nyan. We are, right? And we are not. So let's just underline these words, separate them in English. So nyan, ido, a low tone with an I. And on the negation side, it's an I, but this time with a high tone. So, nyan, ido, low tone, but I, nyan, ido, meaning we are. Nyan, ido, ido means we are not. Second person singular, you are, afo. And this has a dot beneath there, so afo. Ado, low tone. With a negation, we use the object pronoun marker for the second person singular, which is a you with a high tone. So, afo, ado, meaning you are. Afo, udo means you are not. You can also say ado. You don't need to say that afo, as always. And here, you don't need to say that afo again. You can just say udo, and that means you are not. Moving on, for the second person plural, you all are. So, ndofo. Ndofo. Edo. Right? Low tone, edo, meaning you all are. Ndofo. Ido. So ido, ndofo. Ido with a high tone. Right? And that's the object pronoun marker for the second person plural. But also interesting with this one, you can also say it with the low tone I. I've heard it being used. So I would stick with this one, high tone, ido. But in my time I've also heard people say it with the low tone I. Ido, ido, right? Ido. So now, we've already done the third person singular, he, she, or it. Anye, ado. He, she, or it is. and anye ido, he, she, or it is not, right? Last one, they are ammo, edo, with a high tone, edo, ammo, ido, again with a high tone. High tone I, ammo, edo, they are ammo, ido, and that's the negation for that. So back to this bit, we can see that the adido, that this bit of the word to be is based off the word be is based on the subject pronoun marker, right? And the first letter of that word will change. But we also see this other word that is ido with two high tones, and that's used for interrogatives. So words like, so if we have, so this is things to remember, right? So interrogatives, hope I spelled that right. So words like when, who, what, and where, we use ido with two high tones. So we would use ido as the word for is. So when is, yak ido, who is, anyewo ido, what is, njambo ido, where is, ijenge ido. So interrogative, we always use the ido to as the word for is, as the word for being. So in terms of the word to remember, we have a comb. So a comb is a noun. A comb is a noun meaning greeting or thanks. We also have comb by itself, which is an imperative, a command word meaning greet or thank. We also have adicom, so we have that infinitive, infinitive verbs. Adicom meaning to greet, to thank, to congratulate, or to show gratitude. And I think that's going to be all for this video. It's also, and see you next time.
Means come here, means come chop.